Hello, world. First of all, I want to say thank you to our newest member and newest level. If I've got this correct, it should be Hato Hagane. Fire and Steel. So, Ninja Cowboy, thank you so much. You're on the workshop dojo as well. But this one is designed to go into the shop by the fire. I need to make a video of that. But if there's not a raging fire going on at that point, it doesn't seem right. Well, on that subject, I don't have one to show you, but in honor, because this needs to be out there, there's now a Dojo Paddock membership board out in the field as well. So thank you all to the Mongetsu. And hello, the 9 people that are already here. North Idaho, hello, and good morning from Virginia. That's awesome. Hello to both of you. Everyone else, as you feel free, shout out where you are. It's always fun to know where everyone's coming from. It's nice to see you, Sailor. It's nice to be back as it's 2026. It's got to be started. It's 2020. That's not the point of it. The point of it is a short sword. 2 points of the short sword was originally I wanted to... It's always good practice to start alive and then wander off of screen. I wanted to reuse this blade. I'm going to get centered. And make a short sword because it's one that I put aside and I felt I needed to revisit. I don't want to do that anymore. I want to start fresh. I want to start from scratch. But I still want to do a short sword. And the first short sword I want to look at is a shikoro. Had to look that up. A saw type sword. I want to talk about scabbards, but I have to get off topic before I can actually get on topic. 22 inches, saw sword, and done in the style of a wood rip saw. So it means the larger teeth up here have to be the biggest, and it slowly tapers down. So we'll just forget that this sword is a long sword and just get rid of it altogether. So if this were to have fit into this scabbard, it means roughly 9 inches of the bottom of this area is no longer being used to hold, well, anything. But it can hold something. Hatsumi has it that it's filled with blinding powder, and history suggests that they would have also had secret messages into this cavern. There's some, I've got, no, I didn't find that picture. There it is that picture. If we can see here for a moment, it is this one. Whoop. That end cap can be removed and come off because it's built into the furniture. And I think we can see, because I don't actually have any with this type of furniture, but if we can see that these metal parts are, well, they're kind of standard for the old touch. Always enjoy your content. Thank you. It's nice that you share that information, because it's like all over the place right now. Because I'm all about, so one of the last comments that's been just running through my mind is that the scabbards would be fought with. And that totally makes sense. Why wouldn't you take that advantage? But if they're just a regular scabbard, we're going to have issues with this breaking almost immediately, that lacquer. And usually it is a softer wood that's used in the inside. So you get these steel bits that I am now finding. Now that I'm looking for them, I'm finding them absolutely everywhere. And it's different levels of these armored caps for the scabbard. So if you want your swords to maintain that reality, that it still fits in with the rest of the world, but it is meant for fighting while carrying a short sword, I want to take best use of this space. So one, looking at the furniture of how that would work to make it look like a regular sword. 2, how could that furniture be also used? Side note, the furniture as I speak is the metal parts that go onto these tools. How could that also potentially be removable? And or that it just entirely is filled in. It's totally just meant for fighting. Take it from carving it from a soft wood and switching it entirely to a hardwood and still keeping the horn fittings for the koiguchi to keep everything not only looking the same way, but still functioning the same way. But the weight, at least, would be twice the amount. Having the extra pieces of steel if not even embedding steel into these edges. It is this guy again. Oh, it's crap soft. So for fighting, for hiding a blade, and really the question also goes to what else could be hidden or used within that section with the definition that it is a fighting scabbard. And all of that is said with having to follow in with the same rules, so it still looks like every other sword. That, I think this is a great representation here. That this sword, it's got the markings of black and gold, but it means the steel bands are well hidden within that scabbard. Also, most of these are going to be done with precious metals. You're going to be using silvers, golds, coppers. I will be doing it all out of steel because I want it to be able to be fought with, and I have a readily supply of steel. But how is that going to grow if they're all going to be off topic for a moment? I wonder if you know whether the metals of the time would spark with flint easily. Yeah, it still has the carbon content. I see no reason why that old steel wouldn't. It's a fun question. I'm going to say yes, it would, because it is only missing a few like chromium and magnesium and a couple other silly things. Thank you for that question, Crab. So what makes it spark? I like getting off topic. Because with that, exactly, that there was bombs that were kept at the time, that there was always a need to be able to transport something either that was secret or a tool that was secret. So this little area, if anyone's interested in chiming in what they think this could go into, and how different ways it can be put together. And I just think this is interesting. Because this is what today is about, rambling about, that the short sword leaving this much area also means that it is a hidden sword. A hidden sword. It's projected to be a full size, but by no means is it. And all of those questions, for the most part, allow me to be ignorant of the real dilemma I'm going through with building the Shikokuru saw sword. I should just speak to English. I'm having enough issues in English. Shikokuro. A saw, an actual, which of course I don't have in front of me, is made of a softer steel. That's a lie. It's not hardened, so you can still bend it. You can cut into it. So if old school saws are wanting to be reconditioned, they just have to cut into that, which means it's not a hardened steel. It doesn't require it because the steel is already harder than the wood, which means you can do a lot of fixing upon it. But when it comes to a katana, that is razor sharp. It's also really brittle. It's fragile. And to each portion of that saw blade would then have that chance of breaking and potentially breaking the sword entirely. Which I have to rub my chin with. Is it so wrong to get it wrong and find out that this is not going to work? Or I've also got a steel that I'm not too sure what it's originally for, but it's what I made my daily carry knife with, and it's a type of steel that it will hold a very, very resilient edge, but it just doesn't have that same cut. It doesn't slice. It's more like a hammer steel. And if I were to make a saw sword from that, I wouldn't technically have to heat treat it. Then it does stay pliable. I can treat it much like a proper saw, but I wouldn't get the hammer. But by not getting the helmet, I get a better chance of not breaking the sword. And is it really called a sword? This is truly just a rant to try to best understand where my mind is with this. There we go. Perhaps. If you know whether, seems like the saw would definitely get caught on something sooner than later. Yeah, in many cases, that's exactly what it is meant to do. It is to get caught on something, not so much as a cutter would be to go through and cut through your target, but to more get into place and just touch your target, to be able to pull and block and rip. As yeah, it's always by definition, it has to get caught on something to be able to cut through. So, with that statement, it is being called a sword, but it's going to work much more like a hanbo is going to be for striking. It's going to hit into the target and pull, which is kind of overkill, but the same hook quality, like a kamiyari, but being able to control the situation with something that only looks like a sword. And if this, and no, that right, much like a sai, it's got a good carbon content, it's got a good heat treat, and that would allow it to be able to strike other pieces of steel and bat it away without it deflecting. I am extrapolating from that. With this would mean I'd be able to strike other swords without technically bending or hurting this blade. And I guess with that preset, if I were to bend it just slightly, I can just hammer it back again. It would be super resilient. More like a sword breaker with no need to cut at all. Yeah, because it wouldn't cut. It would be with all of those saw blades, even with as much power and heavy, it's never going to cut through a target. I highly doubt it's going to cut through a target. I think it's more for that deceptive, having a different style of warfare. Yeah, thank you. With your questions, Crab, yeah, I think we're going with it's going to be not heat treated. It will be still forged like a blade. It'll be finished like a blade, but we'll pass the heat treat. Yeah, I keep stuttering on that. But as this is it's a crystalline structure. When you have a crystalline structure, if you have just any sharp angles, you have an easy place to break the blade. In many cases, the best part of having a Hummel, that wavy line, means you always know where that hardened steel is. So when it does fracture because of that brittle, it's only going to go so far. It's not going to travel through. So if I were to make it out of heat treated and grab hold, I would only ever lose those teeth. But losing those teeth, I think, would be sad. And it would really defeat the purpose of, as you've just stated, as a sword breaker. Something with that weight. Okay, no, I want to expand on that. Yeah, let's make it a sword breaker. As this is a crystalline structure, it's extra hardened steel that you can take those blows, but depending on how hard you hit and where you hit, we know that the Jite were able to break this steel. This saw sword. Okay, so there's like one of the first tests on a piece of hardened steel, backside of that saw edge. See if it can break it. Brilliant. That makes me feel better. It makes me feel better because I knew I was going to break it. The moment it was heat treated and I did the first thing with that tool, it would have broken. So no heat treat. That seems sad to write down, but it's the only logical way to get this thing to actually function as a saw sword. Shikoro is a translation I've got from this book on a saw. And I swear I just watched a video that used the same wording to describe shikoro, but there's no kanji with it. So is it shikoro to? I'm going to call it a shikoro to for this moment, just because I need to move forward with this. And as it's 226, I need to come up with the build list for this year to see what's actually going to go together. This has to be finished, and I want it to be able to go against that type of tool. That'd be a fun battle, because that sword's not going to break, and this is so going to be a sword breaker. But currently, It seems every time I carve a little bit more off of what will be a konobo, I have to go back and carve a little bit more off of that konobo. It's slowly becoming manageable, but not as fast as I wanted it to be. But you know, you got to get it wrong about 18 times before you can get it right. I don't think that's how it works. But it also falls into that sword breaker category. Like sword breakers, apparently. Like anything that can capture a blade, or in other words, distribute. No, change the game plan. Just simply put it, that sword's coming in. If they think one thing's going to happen, if you can make something else happen, I think that's a fun effect. Because if you can get that brain to have like a pause for a couple seconds, I think that's always the best attack, because that allows you to come into that next maneuver. Just to clarify, sword breaker is a specific tool that's shaped like a dagger with teeth. Okay, okay, that is no. That is a style. Yeah, that is called a sword breaker. Okay, so I'm referring to a sword breaker of anything that can actually break a sword, anything that is of a high enough, a sword being of a high enough heat treatment that it can fracture. You're talking about, it's quite gorgeous. It's a medieval tool, dagger, 18 inches, and it's got super held teeth, maybe 3/4 of an inch, kind of like a jute all along the back. So to clarify, no, nothing like that one. No, the only chance of this one being able to break the swords is just due to its sheer weight going down at the right angle. Where that one, how do you word that? Because I've broken steel, but with a truncheon, with a hammer. But with a sword breaker, with those teeth that are situated I think it's roughly every 3/4 of an inch to an inch off to one side, and then there's a blade on the other side. So we can imagine that it's this, and this isn't near as wide. This actually would be much more appropriate for it. So on one side, we've got that cutting edge. On the other side, we've got all of those teeth, and that you're able to catch, and then through leverage, be able to break that blade. I see that one being a real great one to capture swords with. Thinking of that time period with rapiers, the amount of spring those swords had, that would have been tough to break. But then you're fighting the maker at that point, not so much the swordsmen themselves. So again, just to clarify, no, not on that style. That is a cool style to do though one day. No, I'm just focusing on how to break the mold. No, it's... I want to follow the rules of the old way of making swords. 22 inches hidden. So I guess Ninjutsu. I'm explaining what I'm doing with very few words. I should try more words. It'd be more helpful even to myself. I want to do Ninjutsu, but I want the armored scabbards. That doesn't look like an armored scabbard. I came across one. Sup? What are we saying? Scott? Hello, Scott. To have the armor pieces, in my mind, I've been imagining like a tetsubo, like a steel, like a bow staff that has rings of steel down it. Usually have 9 on each side. Great for momentum. So I've been imagining putting steel rings but it's going to stand out like a sore thumb. My whole idea right now, I'm making the switch over to it needs to still look like a period sword. It cannot stand out. I'd rather it stand out like these stand out. These stand out so well because of how well they're finished. They don't stand out because they look ugly. And mine was getting ugly. So thank you for everyone who's come today to watch this live. Apparently, as the title suggests, but not so accurate, this is me dealing with the point of this ninja sword and how I'm going to put it together. And thanks to everyone, but definitely Crab. Yeah, I'm able to confidently say, I know I'm moving forward with this. Very nice ninja to greet idea. Thank you. Hello. I wonder if there would be a way to embed the metal flush and coat it with something. of course, there's always a way to do something. I wonder if there's a way to. What part of the metal do you want to embed? Coat it with something. Because, like, we have lacquer. What are we coating? What are we making? Are you making something different than I? Because I'm jumping all over the place. I'm taking back this book again because this one has the slide. Your armored, okay, armors, the metal flesh and coat it with something. Okay. So make the scabbard smaller. So this one we're already dealing with what? 1/4 of an inch. Yes. Okay, now if you say that, so I wonder if there would be a way to embed the metal flush and coat it with something. The steel doesn't coat so well with lacquer. But what if that just became the steel and put a wedge of steel into the side so it has that additional momentum to go through? You could still put the larger steel plates on and just bring up wood sheaths to make that fit in place. So it would look just like a regular scabbard, but there would be that much more steel underneath. So I guess what I'm hearing from that is forget how these scabbards go together. Remember that solely I have to be able to hold this blade securely, make it look like it's a katana. But I think reevaluate how, because if I do what Crab says, dig them down further, use a thicker steel, but build it up with wood. I like it. We're getting further on this. You just make it without a suba. That's neat. Oh, no, I do like it without the suba. I think this is a beautiful sword. And there's something of the elegance. I had a cane sword at one point and didn't have a suba. But no, I do have a suba. It needs a lot of work. The edges of this thing are super sharp and I just keep cutting myself. But more so it was done for pictures. And it hasn't made it back on. As I made a little piece of purple heart that takes up that space so I can use it without a suba. But it needs to match. It needs more furniture. That these modern ones are great. And I like that sleek design. Make it a walking stick. I do need to make a walking stick. I'm all over. Thank you. No, I like being all over the place. Hit it in an actual, which means I also need to make the blade as straight as possible. We're just going to take, that's another thing to practice, like parentheses on making straight swords. Because of how you distribute the steel when you're technically just squishing it along, if it's straight when it comes time to heat treat, as I submerge, it's going to curve up. So the key to this is as you're forging it, you forge the curve downwards towards the cutting edge. So when it comes to heat treat and you submerge, it then straightens itself. Because I like the idea of this going into a walking stick because the monks carried things very similar to that. But to get the nicest, I feel, aesthetically, the nicest look is to have that straighter edge so it can fit in a smaller width container. The ones that I have seen, for the most part, though, they all have curvature to them. I think swords look cooler with no handguard. Yeah, I'm with you. It's just... And the handguard is to make sure that my hand doesn't go onto my blade. Those who thrust upon a target with no handguard, I like the idea. Especially if it's only one-handed. But aesthetically, I'm 100% with you. Also, ballistic spear. Check out my ballistic cane. Fun. A ballistic cane. I'm not big for the explosion-y things, but I do like spears. Thank you, Scott. A ballistic cane, no, that's just a Yari, but we're going, okay, I'm handguard on my sword is like riding a bicycle with a helmet. That is a great way of putting it, and we should wear helmets if you want to actually keep your hands in good consistency. Sure is a nice look, but I also always wear a helmet. It shoots a spike. Wicked. I'm pretty sure this was an anime. The idea that the sword came out and then it became a naginmaki because it connected into the end of the other. What we were talking about earlier about having that become steel and lacquered down. There's got to be a way to come up with putting another variation, another henka on what these scabbards can be, as yours has that shooting spike option. How could you attach? It doesn't have to have that sound effect, but that sound effect would do the job to be able to then stand back that much further. You better not hold this together at the same point. Looked at the illusion. Yeah, that's it. Instant nagamaki. A ballistic spear. That gave me the idea of then how could you make a spear that then connects to that end? But then if you're going to make a spear connect to it, why not make the sword connect to it? So if that end, which I really have to look up what the end of the sai is called, because if it's the koiguchi at the mouth of the scabbard, which is now behind me, I don't know what the end card is called, but it needs to be adjustable. I think you made a video about wrapping your handle for support when using an axe in certain ways. Is there anything like that for swords? Yeah, yeah. We could wrap it any way possible. We could, oh yeah. That question totally stopped my mind. That is definitely the thing of Zen, one hand clapping. It's a great idea, but I shouldn't just stop and lose myself on it. Another note. A part of the fun of coming up with these answers, coming up with these, I guess, questions and answers, that when it comes to the Japanese sword, I have more books on the swords themselves than I do of actual fittings. And of course, that's just the construction. The smith, sword polishing. Now I'm lost with a new idea. Oh, you people are wonderful. I like rubber handles on knives like the Cold Steel, Kuban, and Oyuban. I wish Cold Steel would make a katana and Odachi that had that handle. Interesting, you enjoy it, like the flexibility of it, the squishiness, or the fact it just always stays clean. I'm a fan of the Ito. I'm a fan of the silk, but there's some of these, in my recent book, it's not my book, it's a book I purchased. It's got a lot of leather used. And I really like the leather on the handles. But if you don't have a comfortable grip, if you're saying the rubber and you're certainly comfortable with it, that's the way to go. I remember the point I was getting to. That I don't need a picture to back this up. What I was getting to with trying to come up with this looking like all of the other ones, when it comes to a Nihonto, like a true Japanese sword forged in Japan, there's so many rules that that blade has to follow and how many lines it has to have, what kind of geometry, what kind of hamon it has. But within all of those rules, there's just such flexibility that, yeah, it has to have a hamon, but what type of hamon is of your charge? What kind of aesthetic you may have to follow? But within that aesthetic, it will be of your own personal aesthetic. I find that really cool. I find it interesting that across the blade, every blade is different. Every blade is uniquely their own, but they're all exactly the same because they're not. And being able to work on a sword that looks just like every other sword, but does some other very strange things. It's an interesting question. Yes, it is the comfort. Okay. You should not notice the handle at all, or it will distract your movement. That's fun. Yeah, if you're distracted, it's going to change your movement. But if you're comfortable, your movement's going to be that much nicer. My training sword gets loose and easy to fall out overuse. I would like to see the blade with the locked mechanism from the scabbard to the blade so it locks in and can be clicked open. Uh, yeah, I think that's a fun. I just had a picture open up. It's not of that mechanism, but the World War II swords, they had a simple little brass mechanism that some were very obvious and others super cool. They'd have the actual mon of the family within the race skin, and you'd press the mon, and that released the little hook so you could draw your sword. And when you sheathed it, it just clicked on and then locked in place. So I'm with you. The more you draw these swords, the looser they become. And there's that. Yeah, you can wedge them up. Of course, proper maintenance. Proper maintenance is always there to have that additional click that you can bend over and they're not falling out. That is another good mechanism. We're going to call that a thumb lock. Where are you? So that have no Handguard can help you feel the wind in the air and give you a better. But okay, so when it comes to sword practice, you really got to live your own soul. If that's what makes you feel, that's what you have to go forward. If it just happens to look cool, that's just benefit to you. Speaking of accent, what difference do Japanese have versus North American or European? Like, I'm assuming you're talking about axes. And okay, I'm just going to assume you're talking about axes. And there's a huge difference. And it's actually fun because if you're not talking about that, that just means it's my own brain excited about axes. Just have fun to say awesome. Awesome. For Japan, most of the small, like if you're kind of kindling and smaller items, you're using more of like a machete. It's like a cleaver, and it's got a wonderful little curvature. It's not like a banana, but it's kind of like a banana. And it's only till you get much larger that you get the axes, the onos. Where if you go to Europe, you can get just a plethora of different bearded axes, splitting axes, lots of steel in one place. I always wondered if that was kind of what mentality came around to state that for this, everyone's going to wrap their steel for almost all of their axes in forge weld, and others will go, no, I'm going to use a blade, and I'll just make that blade larger until I really need splitting quality. Then they're going to go to that same process. That'd be a fun, just whole video dedicated to different axes. A sword that has many functions are hidden seems perfect for ninjutsu. Yes, it does. It seems very appropriate. The whole thing is about being hidden, not being noticed, just going about your own business. So thank you. But a thumb lock, a thumb lock doesn't seem like the right word, but it's the one I have. Thumb lock, like a sword lock. It's a good thing I can build things because I am terrible at naming. A thumb release. A thumb release is much better. Thank you. Because you use your thumb to release it. It'll be brass. No, it can't be brass. It's got to do steel. I feel for one of my rules, as we talked earlier, I'm talking earlier about that they have to follow a lot of the guidelines. A lot of the really cool stuff have access to the really expensive materials. But for ninjutsu, that you tend to see like the simplest. They may have more carvings to them. There may be more cutouts, but usually all the furniture is steel. The suba is steel. The furniture for the scabbard is steel. So I'm going to stick to that, thinking that steel is abundant for me, and I just have to take a lot of time. So for that thumb release, I can use a spring steel to back up a piece of steel that I actually carve out. Yeah, that'll work. I do mean the thing on the Japanese military katana. That's the reference I went from. But recently, and of course I don't have a picture right now, I found a reference of like a Sengoku Jidai katana that had a thumb lock, much like the World War II, but it had their mon instead, so it was entirely hidden. If you didn't know you had to press that, it just looked like a manuki. You have to press it in like a lever. PGL, thank you for nice seeing you. Happy New Year. Yeah, it's fun to be streaming again. I guess FYI, I was really hoping to have this accessible on live stream and horizontal through the OBS software, but I know a lot more about hammers than I do about software. So we'll just work with it within this. A chalk ribbon that shoots out to a ridiculous length seems easy instead of chalk using. Oh, why are you in? Of course, something has to pop up. Something that shoots out this spring loaded. That earlier there was that wooden. I'm guessing they were wooden spears that shot out, but if they shot out bow shuriken, the same idea. They're ridiculous. I have to be hindered by springs, but there's no reason I can't make a spring. As I draw a spring for a moment, what was the historic one's fur? I don't know. Okay, so we got a thumb release, out of steel, wrapped handle, unfinished steel, polished like full, that has the capabilities to break a sword. I had pictures of this thing at one point, but I think I've burnt them since then. We are getting there. And then having multiple, this is going to have to be like, this will be this year's build. Maybe get 2 of them in because I do want my own Ninjutsu. It feels wrong. I didn't make that sword. And it sits on this wall and everything else I've made. And that seems like a cheat to me. So I have 2 options, both of them Ninjutsu. But then I want to revisit this multiple times. As the statement earlier of like, it just screams ninjutsu, having so much hidden in one little space of what really is a well-designed reach tool. It's a hanbo. It's a stick that you have to carry with you. And then having aided with the sageo, there's techniques which you would balance your scabbard while holding the sageo to look through areas. Well, to look through. You can't see, apparently, in this idea. And if something were to happen, you were able to attack. I don't know how that's going to manage into this, but it has to fit in. I think no handguard also gives a psychological advantage. It's scarier than other guys lack self-preservation. Isn't that the truth? And if most of this fighting idea is that deception, and you give that perception, I don't want to reuse that same word, but you're definitely onto something. You get them to question. You want to create that opening. And I think that does give you're not going to be too sure, much like someone coming in with the opposite hand, that it's going to be very similar, but having it come off just slightly. I think on that note, many don't practice through the other hand, specifically in katana. Everything is done this one style. Being able to have, why does one have to, you're always going to have a dominant side, but being able to practice on both sides, having that availability to technique. Okay, I'm going to ramble. I ramble about everything, but when it comes to Kuki Shindenru, which is out of the Bujinkan, and it's very sword-based. Sword, it seems like a silly term, but please just bear with me for a moment. Sword-based. Your hands are always on the sword, and you are working within the sword's reach. You're cutting to the triceps. You're cutting up into the chin area. You're cutting to kote. You're stepping through for ski, for thrusting. A very samurai, very sword-based art. Then you switch over to a ninjutsu, something that is 22 inches. We're roughly 6 inches smaller than that full-size sword, but you're pretending that it's the right size sword. You may be even holding it in such a way that your opponent doesn't know how long that sword is, which then means you have to really move into your target rapidly to cover that space. But then when you do so, the techniques become very different. Like it's a sword using a sword, that you are attacking with the sword, but you're having your hands come off. At times you can go over their hands to trap them up with the sword. You're using it just like the other arts, but like slightly different perspective. It becomes like a sharp hanbo with a handguard. It's a lot meaner. Ooh, completely unrelated. I love unrelated. Oh, but I have to read the first comment first. I've never seen a taser blade. Could be used to tase a light fires or in grass or anything so you can cause distraction. You know, I've been wanting a flame blade. I don't know, a taser blade. I'm writing it down. I can do a flame blade. I've been practicing, at least in my head, how to get a blade to burn kind of safely that still would allow me to cut. That would be a great distraction, a flaming blade, but a taser blade, that seems very sci-fi. I like sci-fi. Completely unrelated, but do you know the Stinger Tactical Whip? No, I do not know the Stinger Tactical Whip. That sounds fun, though. I like whips. Flexible weapons, they don't scare me. They just tend to hit me a lot. So I do my basic practice with my flexible and then go back to swords. I like my swords. So it's a whip. Tactical. Also like how the scabbard could be used to breathe underwater. That's a fun idea, that it gives you that added passageway all the way through. I think that would even fit to the idea of this part is removable. Maybe that's where the pipe comes in. You match a little flower or something. It's got to do multiple things or it's just not cool enough. I have Raiden swords from Metal Gear Rising. Nice. Tomoyuki Nemboto was a weapon designer from, made the swords. North Mountain Blades. Really? That'd be fun to look up. Some of the, you gamers, you get some really cool designs on your swords. He won't ask you, so I will hit that like PGL, man. You get me every time with that. Thank you. The Mido Katana is a 7X and the Waka is a 7. That is awesome. Thank you, everyone, for being patient with me as I write this stuff down, because I will come back to this. We also get some very dumb designs. Yeah, I bet you do. But there's got to be some cool ones in there, which is great, as that shows us. Yes, it's not expensive either, like 400 shipped. Wow, that is cheap. Are you familiar with Ashitaka's sword from Princess Mononoke? Ashitaka's Princess Mononoke. I'm going directly to her blade, so no. I am not familiar with that sword. What should I know about that sword? That's one I should be looking up. I've got a lot of swords to look after and a lot of swords to look up. $400 for a shipped sword. That's crazy. It's that timeline we live. I'm going to buy a sword faster. You can get a sword delivered to you quicker than I could make mine. But it is pre-made, so I need to look up these swords. So I've got lots of furniture to design, lots of furniture to make, and jigs. And one of these is going to have to be made from an actual quality metal. I want something out of silver. I'll know what it's going to be, and it's probably going to have to be small, but I think something should be more of an interesting. It looks like a machete, but based on a... Oh, okay, so I know who you're speaking of. So the sword that I find, what you're talking about, Ashita, there's when you watch some of the cutting demonstrations in Japan, and it's when they're cutting usually a line of roughly 8. And the sword, you get the regular guys come out with their regular katana, and then inevitably someone comes out with the sword you've just described. It's like a machete. It's a little extra long, it's a little wider, and it's a lot thinner. It's very similar to the Korean sword, but not, because it's so much larger. That thing cuts. It just very little resistance to a very sharp blade. It's kind of terrifying when you think about how many bodies that one sword could cut through. What puts the most in touch with the history you're researching? What puts you most in touch with the hip, what puts me most in touch? That's a great question. Cheese crabs. Just what puts you most in touch? Geez, a part of me wants to just say I like researching it. What actually put... That's a great question. You made a functional replica of that Ashitaka sword. Well done. Condor machetes, especially Yoshimi, my favorite sword. I got a lot of swords to look up. Walking. I think walking puts me most in touch. It seemed every time Hatsumi talked about different practices, he got everyone to walk first. There's something about those basics. There's something about those tiny little fundamental aspects that we all have to go through that makes it seem that connection that like all of us would have had to struggle. So for me, what my personal would be the hamon, would be that pattern. It's not a pattern. It is how I've put the clay, and I've made sure only a part of the steel has been heated and the rest has not. So I'm guaranteed to get that hamon. It's like my own sanshin kata, that we all have to take our time to go through those actions, and you know that you're connected to them, as we've all had to practice that one moment. But there's something very specialized to that moment as a maker, that there's that fear, there's that excitement. And when it's successful, you almost feel like I know what I'm doing. Ring pummeled in this one's. So Ashika's sword, the one that now you're describing, is a lot like the Chinese war sword. It was, now theirs went much wider, more like a Kwandao, but it did have that big ring, as most of them did. Have a good weekend. Masks are offensive. And remember, if I'm understanding that right, yeah, masks are offensive. Just stop by and say I absolutely adore you and your content. I'm 36 and got my first tabi boots when I was 12. Nice. You understand like comfortable feet are our way of life. And thank you so much for sharing that. It's always nice to hear. Don't let it go to my head, though. I've got so much to do. Oh, someone's from Paris. Nazer, that name sounds familiar, but I highly doubt I remember you from Paris. Oh, no, because I've practiced in Lyon. So no. But hi to Paris just the same. And hi to everyone else, to wherever you are. Sword practice, sword. It's nice that we all have that same thing in common, that we all have that passion for swords, and there's that aesthetic that we said earlier, that video gamers get a lot of great swords, and the statement is, yeah, we get a lot of really nasty ones as well. We all have an eye. Like, why are humans so able to see swords, these weapons, so artistically and so rapidly, that there's what we like and what we don't like? That is a strange thing to contemplate. That is the connection to history. Crab, I'm going to have to put you in the signing of this scabbard or something for this sword. You've kind of described and designed a fair amount of it. Thank you. Well, everyone, as my questions have all been answered, it's so selfish, but my questions have been answered. Does anyone have questions for me to answer, or anything that you'd like me to ramble on about? Because if not, I should probably get going and draw this up, because I have a lot of work to do for this one. And I have a lot of work to do for a whole bunch of other things that are coming up in our videos. The video has some history of the sword. This video has some history of the sword. Thank you. Just a little bit of history. We only talked about like the Japanese and the Kodachi specifically. But they are all to do cutting. Are there ninja songs? Okay, I guess is there ninja songs? Is there? So with that said, I'm able to make a lot of things. I can design, I can forge, I can carve, I can sew. I couldn't carry a musical note in a basket. Mm-mm. So no, I've not done any. But there has to be ninja songs because there's the flute, and the flute became, yeah, there would be ninja songs, or there would at least be songs that would have been sung at that time period of that village culture. Oh, that's a great song. Because I'm supposed to learn a flute. I'm supposed to learn an instrument because I find them difficult. Where do you score steel from blade making? Okay, I'm really lucky for blade making. So as I said earlier, that this is a blade. This is, okay, not this blade, of course, but the steel I purchased right online that you can search out at 1080. 1095, 1060. You can choose what type of carbon content. But I have to give you that caveat of where do I source steel from, because I find new steels really boring. They just don't have the life. So I found recently, so in testing steel and where I live, there's a thing called a rock sled. And a rock sled for farms was just it was just really a flat piece of wood with really thick skis, and you just pile rocks onto it, and you'd hook your biggest horses off to drag these rocks across to build your fences, and that would allow you to clear your fields. I live in an old farm area, and there's still a lot of steel that's just in the yard, or I can go and check the marketplaces and such. So by getting this steel, when I forge it out, the best part about it, because it's old steel and it doesn't have that modern additives that make them a little less, well, my stuff rusts quicker, but you can give a higher polish. But because it rusts quicker, it's also a little darker, but it has a great carbon content, and it gets a really active hamon with very little polishing. And I get even a little bit of the ghost layer, which sadly that camera doesn't pick it up. So that's where I get my steel from for making blades. I look for large pieces of really old steel, preferably 3/8 of an inch thick. Like, do they sing their prayers or like some other cultures? So you're going to get so when you're studying the mudra, you're going to have the chanting. That's going to be very Buddhist. So I don't know if we can really say that is of a ninja culture. It's more of just a religious culture. And if you're going through the Kujin, there would be that rhythmic way of chanting through. My wife is Japanese, and I always tell my daughter she comes from a long line of ninjas. When my wife denies it, I tell her that's exactly what a ninja would say. It's gorgeous, because that is what a ninja would say. Yeah. If you're trying to prove me wrong, I'll back up that. Do I have any Odachi? The closest I have an Odachi, it's so inappropriate to leave the camera, but I'm about to. Because you can technically still hear me, so it counts. The only Odachi currently is, well, a European style. It gives the reach, but now it's time to actually make a wooden one in that same stance. What is it? The Ghost of Yokai? I don't know. But the character wears the Odachi on the back and practices drawing with it. I think that'd be amazing. As they did historically wear them on the back. I treat it with wood because I find this is a tool that's a lot of fun to train with, as it is to fight against polearms. It's to fight against people on horses. It's to fight against other swords. But you get that additional reach with a sword that's only a little bit more weight. It's a lot more weight. Classic. Yeah, I like how everyone loves the fact that, yeah, your daughter comes from a long lineage of ninja. What's your favorite weapon that's also a handy tool? Thank you. But it's definitely swords. It would be the Kodachi, though I don't have a proper one yet. But I say handy tool because it has all the different accoutrements, But much like the machete to chop wood, you can chop wood with this tool. You can cut, you can stab, you could make it into a spear. It's meant to be like an all-purpose everything. What did you want it to do? That's what it's about to do. I like the fact that a lot of the katas that I work with this style works more like a hanbo. So I think in that it's so effective because it's so many tools. And most importantly, if done properly, not that it has to be on your back, but if you're wearing it as a normal sword, it still has the representation of a normal sword. And then it's also a distraction. That's my favorite tool. I say that and then look behind me because like a close backup has to be the kama. Specifically, I want a kasurigama for this aspect though, to actually have the handguard that you could go into cutting close range. You can use it to harvest bales, but you can capture and attack. And with those attacks, kind of like a war pick, but you've got that blade entering into the target in such a way that when many want to block an attack, that blade's still passing through. So I also like the idea of this as a backup tool, a favorite tool that does multiple things, because kind of has that very similar energy. And with the hidden aspect, it was meant, at least from a historical perspective, yeah, peasant. It would be a simple tool that anyone could have. There aren't a lot of good tactical odachis on the market. Only good one I know of is, oh, you know of a survival odachi. That I have to check out. Because to get a proper odachi that is meant to handle some cutting, that's got to cost a pretty penny. As it's a lot of steel. There's a odachi, and it's in a museum in Japan. I think it's over 100 kilograms. It's like 10 feet long. It is ginormous, would be an understatement to just the amount of polishing that this sword would have had to go into. Now, this one, not meant to fighting. This was not an odachi for the battlefield. This was an odachi meant for a shrine and to whomever had to manufacture it. What qualities, what abilities. Yeah, it's got an epoch survival odachi and it's only $200. That's nuts. But spring steel and a 920. I'd want to sharpen it. I'm not a fan of buying things for the most part, but I'm going to look into that one. Odachi. That'd just be fun training. Just bypass the wood altogether. And a 9260. It's definitely a modern steel. It's going to have a fair flexibility. Being spring. Kobunyaks. Thank you. Well, there's my sword research for the day. Now I'm trying to buy a sword, and I've got 2 being made. Everyone, thank you so much for coming out today. Crabsoft, I'm going to put you in front. Thank you so much for all your advice here. And thank you everyone else for just being here and helping out, coming to some decisions and walking through a little bit of history of swords. So I'm going to let you all get back to more interesting things than I, and see you next time. You too, PGL. I hope you're probably up to something interesting. Okay, everyone. Sayonara.